Hello, everyone. I'm really hoping the session started as instructed. The buttons turned red. So first of all, welcome to the presentation. My name is Zuzana Bodnár, Service Portfolio Manager at Deutsche Telekom. Let me grab my screen and tell you interesting about robotics and our robotics journey. So first things first, the mandatory communication slide, in case somebody from our communications is listening, to show you how amazing our company is, and in case you don't know the Magenta T, tell you what we are doing. So Deutsche Telekom AG is one of the world leading providers for integrated telecommunications with very strong basis of IT that we provide not only to our B2C customers, but of course, in large portion in B2B, and in many countries also to critical infrastructure, especially now during the COVID, which obviously raises the challenges for our networks and our IT provisioning to be very stable, very state-of-the-art, and of course, very secure. I will not go into the detail on how great and how big of a revenue the company made in the last year. I just have to say that we were able to grow by about 20%. The COVID times have been very gentle on IT and telecommunications sector. But something that I think is interesting and I want to touch up on is the scale of the company. We have over 226,000 employees in 50 plus countries of activity. So you can imagine the complexity of environments and also of the legal environments. Our main IT sectors are currently in Germany, Russia, Hungary, Slovakia, and also in India. So, of course, the processes that we have not only depend on the local processes of some companies that we also integrated, but also on the legal aspects that are specific to each country. And not to forget, we are on the market for over 26 years by now. So you can imagine that our IT landscape is very heterogeneous. There are just some applications that, were basically deployed in 2021, state-of-the-art, artificial intelligence embedded. But there are some applications from the 90s that carry very critical information. So when we pursue the RPA and process excellence, we definitely have to count on both sides. And the challenges of IT landscape are really, really serious for the concern of this side. To tell you a little bit about ourselves and our organizational unit, we are a service hub that provides solution in robotics and artificial intelligence. We run in accordance to the SAFe methodology, agile processes, and basically, as we speak, we are in the PI planning as well. More interesting than that is the perspective on how Deutsche Telekom in general is running. We are a decentral company, so we do believe that IT should be present in all of the areas. IT centers of excellence are established to provide basically the quality baseline and to provide a strategy framework and the core of the knowledge. But we do believe that business units and just all the units in majority of the countries when we have a strong presence have the right and should have the possibility to really explore and invest into the automation, because you have to start the automation basically from the core, from where people are really touching up on the processes, touching up on the customers to really be efficient from the bottom line. On our focus, we started basically with the end-to-end development of the robots, and then we expanded our portfolio into doing also consulting for the business units. We started providing templates and our own platforms basically. And then about 3 years ago, we started to invest also in solutions in artificial intelligence, where we currently pursue especially the AI-based analytics and the voicification aspects. For the technologies that we work with, you have there named a few. Telecom-wide, we have 10 plus providers of RPA solutions. Some of those we only run on-premise for our customers, but majority of what we are currently using is NICE, Blue Prism, and ProcessRive plus Macrobots. Third-party tools are usually used because of their simplicity, are usually used in the business areas where business is trying to develop and invest in some automation. And we have also internal in Telekom developed platforms for RPA and for obviously AI that we develop from scratch and that we also run. The plus of majority of these platforms is that they are basically standard script-based platforms, which means that just the flexibility and the efficiency aspect is not being in competition with the market tools. Just much faster. We are much more agile with what we can do, and we can develop the technologies any kind of way how we need in telecom. Specifically, our Center of Excellence is heavily investing in Blue Prism currently as a third-party provider, but our go-to technology, especially for the future, is Process Drive, which is an in-house developed tool, also possible to for external market, of course, which is a tool with Python-based, meaning that in our experience, it cuts the development time, but especially it cuts the runtime of a robot by 1/3 to 1/3, so 1/2 and 1/3, which means that robots are much faster, much more stable on Python, and of course that's especially for business critical and time critical processes of the essence. Right. About the scale of our RPA solution, I can tell you that we have one of the largest robot farms worldwide as a whole company. And we currently have one of the largest Blue Prism installations in Europe, specifically our Center of Excellence. Before somebody quotes me saying that we have 2,000 robots running, we don't. We have about 2,000 live processes currently. There is quite a lot of fluctuation, so it can be a plus by now. And I can tell you that we have over 870 virtual workers currently working in Telekom. This is the data from last year because we do the complete inventorization once a year. And a virtual worker, for your understanding, if I say a virtual worker, it can be, it's a robot entity that can have one process and one skill running basically 24/7, or it can have, a multitude of different processes that are each running a few hours or a few minutes a day. We do believe that for RPA to be really efficient, multi-skill is the way to go, especially for the processes that are just not running that heavily on time. My question before we move on, I have a poll prepared. I would like to know how long have you been working with RPA? It would give me an insight to how deep I should go or touch up on some points. Please feel free to answer the poll. I know there is some lag, so I will continue talking and I will keep the poll open for something over 1 minute. All right, so for our automation journey, let me just take. All right. So on our automation journey, we have started about 7 years ago as a company, and our Center of Excellence was established about +5 years ago. For that, I would like to say that it has been a rocky ride. It was from the beginning a very chaotic thing because we just implemented one automation tool. And in the very easy times, we have started to work with a finance department. It was very opportune because we had the possibility to very fast gain the financial independence and work in an area where the processes are really structured. If you imagine a finance department with established processes running for several years, you know that the processes will not really change. The people know them really by heart because it's very structured and just a very serious area. If we were doing some automation and marketing, it would be a different story. Of course, it also gave us the opportunity to very fast gain the access to processes that are, for one, bringing enormous savings, not only on time, but also on finance. And we were able to very early quantify that. It took us about a year to even start being, in a way, reactive, start being able to satisfy the demand of the business units. But just the work in the finance sector gave us the immense experience that we were able to profit from. To understand also in Telekom, as said, we are running decentrally. And the business units, in some cases, have to also be working as a profit centers, not really generating profit in internal environment, but you have to be able to basically finance fully what you are doing in your department. That was definitely a challenge at the beginning because RPA, and especially at the beginning, the processes that we have been doing were basically just thrown on our table, and we were trying to gain even the processual excellence and experience to do them. Difficult. Around the second and third year, we established that the process, an RPA process, should pay for itself in 1 year in development and infrastructure cost. It was a big deal, especially if you are working with license cost heavier applications for automation. I have right now the results of the poll. Very much thank you. So majority of you is in first and second year, and some are just starting. Thank you very much for giving the answer. All right, so if I look back at our first and second year, we have been very reactive, and we have been just starting to work on our systemic approach. In around that area, it was very critical for us to establish a strong cooperation with various sectors that were simple to work with. For one, standardized sectors, and for the second, sectors that have been very strong on their process side. One of the things that was very important at the beginning also was the experimentation with the platforms. You have seen some of the technologies we have worked with named. It was very important and very helpful for us to do POCs with different technologies. We still do it. And what was critical for us to find the cost-efficient one that was working with our state of knowledge. We are an IT center, so we obviously have also the scripting at hand, but our goal was to also reach out to the citizen development. I will talk about that later. So it was very, very critical to also have a tool at our disposal that was pretty understandable and that was usable also in that area. And not to forget, in first 1 or 2 years, it depends how your company is structured, we have younger and older teams. We have teams that are very tech savvy, but we also have the teams that are more traditional. In about the second year of our journey, it was one of the critical things was definitely the people mindset. There were always worries about automation taking jobs, and getting people on board was one of the most critical things that we had to do. It was very important that we established processes that were not necessarily end-to-end, but were horizontal and were touching up on a lot of people and just saved a lot of times directly on basically the company floor. Let me move to the next point. We actually have two approaches to RPA currently live in our company. One is the vertical automation, which I would say is mostly traditional. And I will also like to get one more poll running. If you can answer, how do you approach your automation? So the vertical automation, or the full end-to-end approach, is basically you looking at the process as a whole, from the beginning to the end, and you're also having a look on the predecessors and successors of the process. So ideally, if you approach a department, you are able to connect the people and connect to other departments as well, to have an outlook ideally from the point where any kind of demand is even just coming to the company, even in paper form. And for you to be able to automate the whole chain of processes up to the predictive analytics, how the process will run in the next few years. If I imagine an ordering process, from the first order that the end customer is sending, I would like to have a new phone. For you to be able to run the whole chain of processes up until the prediction of how many phones do you have to prepare for your customer for the next year. So that's one approach. It really offers great possibilities for process optimization. We are running also with areas that provide other kinds of automation tools, from test automation, different backend automation, which gives us the possibility to establish for each process a timeline, not only for today, but also the timeline, for several next years in alignment to our software release containers. So we are able to also anticipate how the processes will change in the futures, how application will change, and also to be already be reactive and proactively implement the automation tools. On the other hand, we have the horizontal approach to automation, which we call pure orchestration. It's something that we started about a year ago in one area. It's basically an objects of microservice-based view on automation. You can imagine to have a robot that is running in a certain system with a pretty wide role and is just logging in the agents all of the time. Then the second robot is basically just clicking himself through to come to a backlog of cases that he needs to work with. And that's running 24/7. And then the next robot is connecting to and just looking or sorting the cases in between the groups. And then the robots are in groups and are just fetching those cases. And one is opening, the second one is reading, and the third one is starting the SAP, for example. It's a pretty novel approach. It's much more difficult with this approach to do process optimization on itself, but it allows for a very, very efficient use of resources, especially the infrastructure resources. If you take into consideration how expensive the licensing is and how the hardware on itself is expensive, this allows to really cut that downtime that you might have. The interesting thing, especially with this approach, are the seasonal possibilities that you have with this. If you imagine you have some kind of a department that is doing the finance monthly closings, it's also ordering cable lines on the first of the month, and in the middle of the month is just checking what kind of phones need to be deployed to telecom shops. You can have basically a cloud approach to that automation. You can, at the end of the month, really concentrate on the finance process, and then your robots can just switch to different processes. Can be done in vertical automation through just planning and scheduling, but the horizontal automation is able to work in with heat maps directly in your orchestration tool, so you are able to just be much more reactive. Interestingly, it's not really that far. So I can't tell you by now which one is more profitable, which one is better. It all has pluses and minuses, but I'm really hoping that maybe in a year or two we will be leaning towards one or another as we see the progress. Okay, but to move to the core of what I would like to talk about, scalability on itself. What are the scalability boundaries, and then what are the scalability enablers? One of the biggest challenges that didn't really come to us in the first year or even the first 2 years, because we were honestly much slower than maybe some other of you on the market, scalability became a huge issue around the second, third. And one of the key problems that we had was the number of development resources. I told you that I will come back to the point to discuss, why we are moving decentrally. Why are we not having just one center that is providing and deploying end-to-end all of the robots that exist? And in our case, it's simply not possibility with the numbers. Seeing it in extreme statistics, if you have 10 developers and 10 robots, everything is great. But if you have 15 developers and 100 robots, at some point, if you are doing the DevOps, your productivity time will be maybe 10-20%, and your maintenance, scheduling, bug fixing time will be much, much higher. So for us, the big point in scalability was to touch up on the tools of the on areas of development resources that are basically unlimited. That is also the reason why we are moving forward with not only script-based RPA tools that are obviously most efficient, but we are also moving with citizen development tools, which allow us to provide the possibility for business departments to automate on themselves, basically tapping to new pool of development resources. And at the same time, we are also running with the partial approach, where we develop the business critical processes but we leave the further development and the maintenance to the business units. Obviously, that frees up the time of development resource, but at the same time, does guarantee the quality of development from a professional developer. Next on my list on the top, bureaucracy. Obviously, you should make it very, very easy to start a cooperation and to start a robot development. Especially at the beginning, people are not on board. Documenting a process, starting to work with you, documenting something for the developer, the discussions, and times for testing with the business unit or with the process owner. It takes time, it takes effort and energy from people. So you have to make it very, very easy to work with you. One of the bigger points in our scalability boundaries was always kind of not thinking into the future. In this case, I will touch up on reactive implementation of policies, but also on general limitations of our IT environment. If you're starting at the beginning, very often I hear that we don't need this and that kind of a policy. We don't need this and that kind of a template. It's fine. We are just starting. We are experimenting. It's very important to take the time to experiment. But very early, you should be prepared to implement, especially the security policies. You should be prepared to implement compliance policies that are on the highest standard in your company, even though you have just few robots, basically. Because I can tell you, if you proactively implement policies, it can slow you down a little bit. If there is a reactive policy coming after some department or some person just messed up, to put it very simply, if there is a policy that is fixing some issue, it can really have an impact on your whole robot landscape. If you have 100 of robots that don't have some kind of a monitoring element or identity tracking element, and then after a mishap, you need to implement that, it will be a huge issue, and it can basically kill whole productivity for several weeks, because you will just have to mend the broken point. And of course, for reactive policies, for policies that are already that are basically coming from the background of something negative happening, you also have to take into consideration the broken trust, and you having to mend the relationship, you having to really get that image of RPA back on. Brings me to the next point, the user and employee mindset. In our company, it very much depends on how tech savvy the department is. We have departments that are just really against, very worried about jobs, not really understanding the purpose, but not really understanding the technology. That's a huge part. People who don't understand, you can come to a very inefficient department and come out with zero processes. Nothing is possible. We can't automate anything. Everything is manual, and it has to stay that way. Pushing on that, it would be just very difficult. The targets that are coming on from the top management on efficiency are not necessarily something that the people, working for 20 years in a certain department are able to internalize, are able to take as their own and want to change something. So it's a huge part. And also coming from the perspective of mindset is internal competition. At least in our company, RPA and AI is a huge topic, very popular. It's a keyword of the day, basically. It's very easy to get into a competition with somebody who is having a similar idea and wants to, bring it first, have that success story in his department. So it takes a little bit of time to be able to just go forward and establish that environment of internal trust. But it will bring you a long way, especially with the end users of the robots. And of course, last but not least, is the technical aspect. The heterogeneity of IT landscape, at least for us, is a huge point. For one, it's the heterogeneity of applications. Not everything is reacting the same, and it definitely limits how much you can reuse the components that you are creating. But the second is also we have different security levels that are that we need to take into consideration, and that also is a big thing, not only with the robot identity and the robot rights, but also in general the technical aspects. Last advice that I can give you is always to be very optimistic about your RPA. You obviously have to start small with few processes and get them to perfection, really improve the quality, learn the skill. But the key is really to be very optimistic. Count with the possibility that in 1 year you are not working with 50 robots anymore, you are working with 500. And establish your scalability possibilities up to that point. Go forward with cloudification solutions, go forward with solutions that allow you to recycle data, get more people on board, very quickly also react to your landscape, because if everything is going really well, if you are doing a good job, you will have to scale much earlier than you are expecting. We, for example, have been struggling with some limitation of our data center. We were not prepared to grow as fast as we actually went in 1 year, and we were struggling with, for one, the data center, and for the second, with virtual machines. We didn't have enough in the telecom, and that was a huge issue, especially for our customers, and it came with a whole mess of us having to combine virtual workers and so on. Difficult situation, especially if the growth is basically happening from the success point. That brings me to scalability enablers. One huge point is you to be able to recycle the components. In company of our size, it's very difficult to keep track of what each department is doing. It's very difficult to keep up-to-date catalog of objects, up-to-date catalog of templates. Therefore, it's very important for you to work with solutions that you are able to recycle, that are standardized and are working in template, so you can avoid the double work that you will be doing constantly. At the beginning, we didn't really work with templates, and we have just a few objects that have been reused all the time. And when our first year hit, it was just very, very difficult for developers to do any kind of bug fixing. If a developer was sick for a week, it could happen that his robots were just standing still, because every developer has his own handwriting. We didn't have the templates. So between developers, and especially between developer teams that have been sitting on different locations, it was basically impossible for them to share the knowledge. That's one thing. And it was basically impossible to reliably run the robots, which of course is unbelievable thing for your stability, for the trust of people that are investing in the automation. It's just not going to happen. Next thing is very important, cost-efficient RPA tool landscape. It's very easy at the beginning to try to work with as many tools as possible. You definitely have to experiment and try that out, but a cost-efficient landscape is not having 20 tools. Ideally, you have all the tools you need to satisfy your needs. Doesn't necessarily have to be the best tool, because if I have to have third-party tools, that one is doing the RDA really good, one is very simple for developers, and one has quite okay OCR recorder, it's not really the case that I'm efficient in all three. It's not even that the developers can really focus and specialize on any of those. And it's not that I can have enough reusable components that all of that is rentable. That's why cost-efficient RPA tool landscape is not too big. You shouldn't add the complexity to your automation landscape. That's very, very important. That kind of a focus and establishing experts in the team is very, very helpful in general, even for the stability of what you do in RPA. One thing that we are doing for the last year, and we see it's much more just helpful than having multiple tools and multiple experts, just core experts for the tool, is also having people that have the multi-skill. We are developing our developers to have more than just one automation tool, just to be able to be flexible and react to the demands that we become. In general, however, the scalability is not endless. At the beginning, you will reach out to many quick wins, many big bets. Everything is going really great because you are catching those slow giant elephants that are just running very slowly in your company. But over time, this will not be any more possible. That's where the efficiency, you will be finding big numbers in efficiency also in your RPA landscape by automation and by internal technical improvement, but also you will have to advance on your value chain to be able to go further. For us, it was very important to start with end-to-end development, but then also to enable others in the company to start doing the development, start doing the bug fixing themselves, start internalizing that knowledge, because for us it was very important to switch to a very volume-driven approach to automation, to be able to invest into establishing compliance, security, additional compliance and security mechanisms, develop the tools that also covered all the compliance needs in our company, and also to move from very simple automation, basically low-level automation that was simple RPA, to smarter automation with components of artificial intelligence, integrating basic algorithms to the majority of virtual workers, and then also, as our goal is, to really advance into through artificial intelligence, doing the big stuff and being really innovative, trying to lead the innovation on the market. It would not happen if you're just doing the small screw driving on the simple processes. That's why our approach is definitely to, after we master a certain step in the value chain, to give it to some other departments and then advance on the value chain a little bit higher. I would tell you a little bit about the 4 value streams that we are currently focusing on, to know what I mean when I say to moving higher on the value chain. So, empowering organization to automate. We have developed several platforms and orchestration tools to be able to efficiently run robots without the dependence on the third-party providers, basically, and to be able especially to change the tools and innovate them as our needs are. We have also, from the third-party providers, I will not name which ones, we have also struggled with them not being fast enough and not catching up with certain demands. That's something that you will not experience in your own IT landscape, because you will just be completely flexible. Second area, as we started basically in finance, our big bet currently is the finance brain. It's the artificial intelligence and RPA combination that provides the advanced analytics, especially to forecasting in finance. In last year already, we reached the prediction rate where the finance brain was working better than the humans that have been in certain departments on some cases. And the big thing what we do, what we want to use the finance brain is creating the AI service able to analyze and able to come with prediction 24/7. So the reactivity of finance brain to any kind of change on the market, to any kind of change in our internal finance structures will be much higher than that of the person that has to also sleep, align with coworkers, collect information, and so on. We started first with the information collection for all the areas, then we advanced to analyzing the data lakes to be able to efficiently prepare the information for human decision. And currently, robots are, or the AI engines and the robots are validating the predictions that humans are doing, looking for fraud especially. And then, of course, we want to advance under 4I principles still for the finance brain to make prediction on his own. And I really love the quote. It was used by one of our very satisfied business customer, quote unquote. Every project makes the finance very smarter. It's very true that the AI is able to learn on each prediction one more time, and just the capability to predict, to be very specific with the prediction and correct, especially with the prediction, is just rising exponentially as we are going forward. Next area that we are very strongly working on is the communication 2.0 and the number of digital assistants and the area of smart office. We do believe that employee experience is of the essence of what we are supposed to concentrate on, because only a happy employee that has enough time to think about things and bring new ideas is an employee that can work very efficiently and is someone who can really advance bring ideas and innovate in his job. So that's why we are trying to disrupt the digital working. We are bringing meeting minutes automators. We are working on presentation assistant and also semantic analytics engines. You can imagine that we have huge data pools of different information in the company, and we have semantic engines right now that are able to make the search in those areas much more efficient and just easier for the employees. Of course, we have a number of digital assistants, not only chatbots, but also voice bots that we integrate to basically everyday work. We have some in service desk area of ticketing and troubleshooting for our employees. And also there are voice engines. If you ever call the Telekom hotline, there is also a voice bot that will be talking to you just like a human. It was a great experience the first time I heard it. That will very efficiently talk you through the conversation, collect the information, and help you. And we actually experience that interactions with the robot tend to be faster, especially for simple things, which allows our operators to really concentrate on people that have very big issues, are in distress, are emotionally just angry because something is not working. It gives our agent a lot of time to spend on the people that are critical and in a critical state, and then the simple demands can be just handled very fast. Last thing that I would like to talk about, because I want to still leave some time for the questions, are some myths in RPA. I'm sure we all heard about some of them. Like, for example, that everybody can be a developer, which is a marketing slogan of some of the tools that we have been working with. I can tell you from own experience, it's not true. Not everybody can be a developer. There are many people that if they have enough time, if they have the opportunity to learn from an expert, to share some objects, they are able to acquire some development skills. Some are able to actually become developers. Some are able to do basic workflow automation, but not everybody can be a developer. And trust me, it's not a good idea to have an endless number of people that are allowed to, just screw something together on their desk. RPA landscape, especially of a certain size, need to be policed, need to be closely checked, and also needs to be very secure in what is happening. Same direction goes into just experimenting and not thinking about policies, and going to work without the process documentation, PDD, without a click instruction. It's definitely true that you need to reduce the bureaucracy. You shouldn't have the people to fill out 20 checklists, then 2 documentations and 1 Visio template. It shouldn't be the goal of what we are doing. But having the process documentation for Aspect, for example, is an essential compliance thing. It's not about just having the documentation of the process for the developer. It's the baseline for us in 2 to 3 years where the robot needs to be retired, when the robot is also already created dependencies to other robots in the company, that we are able not only to track it, we are able to talk to people and departments that initially designed it, to be able just to understand the whole thing, track the whole thing, reshare it. And of course, it's very, very essential that we know how the processes have been created, and how they have to just be handled in the future. Last time on the conference, I had a great discussion about security of the robots and how to avoid in general that I will build myself 10 robots and have some kind of a malicious intent, and those 10 robots in the combination can do something which is not anticipated, some hacking attack. Of course, that could be possible for a hacking genius. That's why it's definitely very necessary to have process documentations and to also check the robots in the dependencies. It's much more a security issue than it is a technical point that you need to have. And one very popular thing is the processes must be optimized before automation. I love that one, because very often we come to discussions if we want to implement the robot somewhere, and somebody says that, well, we are planned for backend automation in a year, in 2 years. We don't need the robot. It's true that a robot should pay for itself in 1 year. That is a rule of thumb for us. But at the same time, there are definitely areas where it makes sense to even implement robot for several days, for a month or something like that, to really, for one, help the employees if they are on such high level of pressure that they can't really work efficiently. It makes sense to implement that in case you are dealing with migrations with huge data lakes or the backlogs that have several thousands of items that you just can't feasibly work with. And it definitely also makes sense to, if needs be, use robots as a temporary solution to solve a very, very pressing problem. So it definitely makes sense. Last but not least, and I would also like to get your input, if you believe that the digitalization will destroy or change jobs. We have that discussion all the time. For us, we do believe that digitalization will change the job, just like other technologies that emerged, book printing, invention of computers, and so on. It significantly changed what we do until now, what we do with our lives. On the positive note, I don't think robots destroy the world or take jobs. They just take over part of that job. In the past, people have been working for 12 hours a day in coal mines. Now those coal mines are handled by robots, and people, are working only 8 hours a day. So hopefully we will come to the point where we work only 2 hours a day and then spend the rest of the time on doing something else. So I will really value your answer. Yes, it will improve lives. I'm so happy that that's the answer. And very last thing before I move on to your questions is what comes next. We see two areas where we approach. For one, it's the machine factor, robots doing stuff that people are not able to. I can name you a fraud detection case where robots is checking thousands of signatures and is looking for a fraud. As a human, I can check 2, I can cross-check even 10 maybe, but if I have 500 pictures laid out, I just can't. It's not in my brain possibilities that I can do it. So that's the machine factor as we see. And the second is robot assistance. Just based on how complex our lives are, how complex the environments are, and the complexity is just increasing, we really do believe that robot assistance will be necessary because human brains are not wired to have an endless information pool. We are wired to decide on truth, on make the decision and find, the best course of action in that data lake that is prepared for us. So I would like to answer some questions in case there are. Let me just have a look. Top challenges in scaling automation. It's a number. One of the top challenges, I say, are just the technical boundaries. We are working with DevOps, and one of the huge challenges was just having the RPA landscape standardized, automated, and have enough objects and recyclable components so we are able to just be very efficient, because you are not able to fix 100 robots in real time. That was the biggest challenge, because we really have observed we are trying to run with 80-20, 80% productive time and 20% time for everything else, including maintenance and bug fixing. We definitely have observed that we even went to 50-50, which is really bad if you imagine that. Having only 50% of your time dedicated to any kind of development work is very little, especially if the expectation after a certain time in your development is that you will basically exponentially, or at least geometrically, increase the number of robots that you are able to produce. At some point, those numbers will go in the slope, just will go down, and you will not be able to advance. And the second issue that we had 2 years ago, it was very, very pressing. It was basically a technical boundary. We haven't planned our environment to be able to scale that fast, and we haven't been able to migrate it to the bigger possibilities. So, it was a huge issue, and we haven't been able to solve it in several weeks. We had customers or business sites that wanted to have robots. We have robots that have been developed but not deployed because we just didn't have the machines. We basically didn't plan with the landscape that big, and it was absolute showstopper for several weeks. What is the ratio of maintenance and development resource in the company? Do you have developers that exclusively maintain robots? No, we don't. We have DevOps. We have areas that only develop and then hand over the robots for further development and bug fixing maintenance, which is usually the most experienced developers. But in general, we do have DevOps, and we try to keep it 80-20. 80% development time and 20% time for the fixing and maintenance. That's the best. We would like to get higher, but I don't think it's happening. And there is also the last question about RPA and blockchain working together. Yeah, maybe it's a little confusing. We, in our portfolio, do have, we started with RPA. Then we integrated solutions with artificial intelligence, different engines, and we are basically snowballing anything that is needed that comes as a demand from our company, basically, because we are focusing on internal IT provisioning. And blockchain is the newest part on our family. It's a newest team. We just started working with them, and we are basically implementing or starting to implement, to be honest, blockchain to our finance department, and starting to just really work on the security aspect of the finance area. Yeah, and we will see how the blockchain will develop. To be honest, we started with the area in a more of an exploratory manner, especially in these few months at the beginning. We just joined it in November, I believe, because for one, if we don't have the skill, we are not able to efficiently and provide it in a way that it makes sense. So we will see where the blockchain will develop and where it will find place in our IT landscape. For now, I can tell you that we are focusing on the finance department in combination with the finance brain. All right, so that's all the questions. Thank you very, very much for joining the presentation. If you have any additional question or want to exchange, feel free to connect me via LinkedIn or on the conference board, and I will be happy to also exchange on your opinions. Thank you very much.